One, two, three.
Hello everyone, I am Be Better Gamer. Welcome to Be Better Gamer Wrestling. This channel is dedicated to wrestling video games fueled by my love, passion, and obsession for them. I am bringing you a very special video today, part of a hopefully ongoing series that I've been working behind the scenes on for a very long time, and I'm finally ready to show you my first episode for it, and it is going to be called Fantasy Booking. It's not a flashy name. I don't really have a flashy name for it, but basically the concept is I'm going to fantasy book past pay-per-views using wrestling games. Specifically today we're playing WrestleMania 2000 and we're going to be fantasy booking WrestleMania 15. And I have some rules and limitations of what I can and can't do, and this is really just an exercise in sort of, you know, me just expressing my creativity with how I watch wrestling and how I view wrestling, and just looking back at the past and seeing what we can do differently. I'm trying to type in the name Philadelphia because WrestleMania 15 took place on March 28th, 1999. To put it in context, WrestleMania 15 came out, WrestleMania 2000 came out in October of 1999, and you know, WrestleMania 15 took place in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, home of ECW, but it was really at the First Union Center, which is now known as the Wells Fargo Center. So basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through the WrestleMania 15 card and I'm gonna change things around. I'm gonna change maybe the order of the card, maybe the lineup, the types of matches, the titles that were on the line, maybe add a few titles, maybe take away a few titles. I set some rules for myself. WrestleMania, you know, for fantasy booking, for the fantasy booking series, I can't use anyone that's not in the game. Obviously. So, you know, for example, with WrestleMania 15, Jeff Jarrett and Owen Hart were tag team champions. Owen Hart is not available in WrestleMania 2000, so I can't use Owen Hart. But Be Better Gamer, you made an Owen Hart call. That's right, I did. And if you can check on my Owen Hart call, if you click the little I button above the video, but I'm not going to be able to use calls. I think using calls takes some of the challenge away. I want to be able to only use the roster that's in the game, and the reason is because, you know, when I wanted to talk about these older pay-per-views using the games, a lot of people were missing, so it was hard to talk about the full pay-per-view for WrestleMania, for King of the Ring, for Survivor Series, whatever, because so many people were missing. So I thought, well, why don't I change it? Why don't I just change everything? And that's when I came up with this idea for the fantasy booking. Now, I'm not saying that I am rewriting this, redoing this because my version is better, because I think, oh, I could have done a better WrestleMania. Like, I'm not saying that at all. You know, what's done is done. What's in the past is in the past. But this is just more of a creative exercise, because when I used to play WrestleMania 2000, when I used to play WWF No Mercy or any other wrestling game, I would always fantasy book by playing the game. You know, essentially, I would always say, oh, well, I want this person to be the champion, or wouldn't it be cool if this person and this person fought, and like, let's do it at WrestleMania. So you would choose the arenas, and then you would just have fun. That's how I view the wrestling games. I view it as an outlet to sort of just have fun as a wrestling fan. So by no means am I trying to say, oh, I'm fixing WrestleMania 15 or WWE did it wrong. You know, they did what they felt like, what they, you know, was right at the time. And another thing about fantasy booking that I think is great, with fantasy booking, we can avoid any backstage politics. We can avoid any, well, we didn't have this match because this person didn't like this person. We didn't have this match because this person was injured. We can erase all that. So I am going to allow myself to maybe use people who were probably left off the card because they were injured. I can't use people who weren't part of the company though. So Chris Jericho, as much I would love to have him show up at WrestleMania 15, I can't do that because he wasn't with WWF at the time. He would come in a little bit later. So there's a few rules and parameters that I set just to create some guidelines, just so like things could be a little bit more clear when I am, you know, making them. And you know, right off the bat, there's a few notable omissions. You know, like I said, You know, Butterbean is not in the game. And we'll get to that. We'll get to that match. Bart Gunn is not in the game. Owen Hart's not in the game. Goldust isn't in the game. And Sable isn't in the game. So I had to work around those people being left out of WrestleMania 15. You know, I changed some of the championships over who was holding the title and who wasn't holding the title going into WrestleMania. I was allowing myself to do that, and I'm going to explain why. I'm going to explain it like as if I'm telling the story of WrestleMania 15. So this is going to be a long one. This is going to be a long video, but if you want to just jump to certain matches, I'm going to put in the timestamps below in the description each and every match. I'll have it all written out. And here I'm wrapping up. I'm actually using pay-per-view mode in WrestleMania 2000, which is something, again, I used to do back in the day when I was younger, when I was playing this game. I would create my own pay-per-views. I would create my own King of the Ring pay-per-views and things like that. So I created all the belts. I gave people championships. We have 8 matches in the pay-per-view setting. There's actually going to be 9 matches, and I'll explain why I didn't put the IC championship match in that in a bit. But there's going to be 9 matches. WrestleMania 15 itself had 10 matches. There was 10 matches total, and so we're going to get started with this thing. It's WrestleMania 15, and we're going to start. The first match is going to be Test versus Big Show. Now, my overall theme for this WrestleMania, for WrestleMania 15, is this is the corporation coming to an end. So at WrestleMania 15, it was kind of weird because the corporation led by Vince McMahon, they seemed to be showing chinks in the armor, but WrestleMania 15 didn't really have the corporation lose in any major way. There was a few big swerves, and even though The Rock would lose the title, the corporation would still continue to exist several months after that, and then it would lead into this whole corporate ministry thing, and I never really liked that. I always thought it was kind of a lot of twists and turns for the sake of being twists and turns. For me, WrestleMania always seems to be either the beginning of a new feud or the end of a new feud. And the big story going into WrestleMania 15 in real life and in this situation was the corporation showing chinks in the armor. So the way I booked WrestleMania 15 in this game is we're going to see every single piece of that armor falling off until the very end. Spoiler alert, you know, where Stone Cold puts the final stunner in the corporation, and that would lead the ministry to rise up. It's sort of like Dragon Ball Z, right? It's sort of like Dragon Ball Z. Here's Frieza, he's a big bad, and then they defeat him, and then now we have Cell, who's an even bigger bad, to replace him. You know what I mean? Frieza wasn't still hanging around, you know, when Cell was there. So that's how I view the corporation. Is like the corporation came, boom, they're gone, and then we'll move on to ministry. The reason why we start with Big Show and Test, because if you remember, or if you don't remember, but on Sunday Night Heat, the Big Show was looking for Stone Cold because he wanted to take out Stone Cold, and Vince McMahon, you know, that he gave him that job to take out Stone Cold. And what ends up happening, he ends up getting a fight with Mankind, and they end up fighting later in the card to be the special guest referee for the Stone Cold Rock match, and we'll get into Mankind a little bit later. So what I did here was, the way I imagined it was, before the event on Sunday Night Heat, Vince McMahon has the entire corporation in the locker room, and he's basically threatening them that if they don't get the job done tonight, that, you know, there's gonna be hell to pay. You know, he's gonna do one of those promos. And, you know, the Big Show is kind of scoffing. You gotta remember, he's still new to WWF. He just showed up at Saint's Valentine's Day Massacre, appearing under the ring, and he actually, you know, allowed Stone Cold to fight for the championship by, you know, throwing Stone Cold out of the cage. And so, even though he's new, he's this new muscle, he's been kind of making some mistakes. So maybe he says something that Vince doesn't like, and then Tess, who is supposed to be the original hired gun for the corporation, says something to Big Show, and they're both going back and forth. And then Vince McMahon is like, you know what? If you guys can't make up your mind, then why don't you settle it in the ring? And he has them settle in the ring. because he wants to see which one of them is going to be big enough and tough enough to do what he wants, which is basically take down Austin at the end of the night. So this is basically Vince McMahon. This is basically Vince McMahon doing the Joker thing, where he breaks the sticks, the pool sticks, throws it, and he's like, fight. Show me which one of you wants this. And Big Show is kind of like, he's kind of put off by this. He's like, I don't want to like just be the one who's always taking orders from you. I'm the Big Show. Like, look at me, I'm a giant. He was called the Giant in WCW. So he mocks Tess, and he's like, fine, we'll fight. So we're gonna open WrestleMania with this match, because what's gonna happen is the Big Show, who is theoretically the biggest weapon that Vince McMahon has, he's gonna lose that weapon. And that's essentially what happens at WrestleMania 15, but it happens in a different way. When Big Show goes out there to face Mankind and beat Mankind so he can be put in the last match, he loses. He gets himself DQ'd, and Vince McMahon comes out, and Vince McMahon gets really upset at him. So the Big Show attacks him. He attacks him, and then Vince McMahon basically has him arrested and has him, exited out of the arena. So basically what I'm doing is I'm sort of doing that in the same way, but just I'm having Big Show leave on his own accord, because after he would beat Test, he'd walk out of the ring and Vince McMahon would go there to congratulate him, and Big Show would just basically walk right by him and ignore him. And then later on in the night, you'd find Vince McMahon would be looking for the Big Show, and Big Show would be gone. I do this for several reasons, because I want to take out Vince McMahon coming out and cutting a promo during the middle of the card. I thought that dragged the WrestleMania, down a little bit, and I like to tell all the stories in the matches. So I feel like you can tell that story with the Big Show, with the corporation losing Big Show as a weapon, and then you're also taking Test out of the equation, because the Big Show is gonna beat Test up so bad and chokeslam him so hard that we're not gonna see Test pretty much for the rest of the night, which will factor in later on to WrestleMania 15. So that's Big Show and Test. That's why I have it as an opener. Now, next up, we come to Jacqueline versus Ivory. So I'm basically omitting Sable's entire WWE Championship run because she's not in this game. And I'm giving Jacqueline the WrestleMania match she never had, pretty much. After Alundra Blaze left WWE because they were no longer going to pursue a women's division, the women's title was vacated until Jacqueline won it in 1998 by defeating Sable. So instead, and then Sable would get it back. Sable would get it back, and she would go into WrestleMania 15, and she would face Tori, who made her debut at Mania. So I'm also actually substituting Tori. So originally this match was Sable versus Tori, and what it really set up was Nicole Bass coming out, and Nicole Bass being the bodyguard for Sable, and they would continue that storyline. So I'm changing all of this. I'm jump starting the women's revolution here, okay? Because Jacqueline and Ivory are both WWE Hall of Famers now. They have been both recognized for their for doing their part in helping showcase women wrestling. And at the time, WWE wasn't taking women's wrestling very seriously. They had Sable as their champion, and she was their Playboy model, that she was their sex symbol, and that's what they really used her for. She wasn't a wrestler. She even admitted she wasn't a wrestler, and there's talks that even she herself did not want to be wrestling. So I'm putting in Jacqueline because I feel like Jacqueline and Ivory, they're in the Hall of Fame, but Jacqueline doesn't have her big WrestleMania match. So we have her going to WrestleMania 15 as women's champion, and she's challenged by Ivory, who is sort of still new to the company as well. Ivory, we saw her be introduced teaming with D'Lo Brown and being, you know, D'Lo Brown's manager, valet, whatever you want to call it. I talk more about Ivory. I also, right now, I'm doing on my channel, I'm in the middle of doing my WWF No Mercy Let's Play, and I'm in the Women's Championship, so I talk a bit about Ivory's career and what she was doing in WWE, so you can check that out. I'll put another link to that in the eye right here, so you can go ahead and see that, and I'll probably also have a link in the description below. So yeah, so instead of Sable, I inserted a WrestleMania match between two very deserving WWE Hall of Famers, and, you know, giving them a chance to shine, giving them a chance to actually wrestle. Maybe we give them 10 minutes or something like that. You know, and I substituted Tori only because, again, you know, I feel like Ivory, she would contribute so much more. And yeah, I'm a little bit more of a fan than Ivory. I'm a little bit more biased. Let me know if you would keep Tori. If you would keep Tori, you'd make it Tori and Jacqueline, or you make it Tori and Ivory, or you make it a triple threat match, or something like that. So that's what I'm doing. This match was actually kind of hard to do. If we're going to be talking about the game, this match was kind of hard to do, and this is something I talk about in WWF No Mercy. You know, Jacqueline, the women in this game, their weak grapples all do the same thing. Like, you know how usually you have your different move for your B, your left B, your right B, up B, down B. Here, it's all the same move for the weak grapple and the strong grapple. So it was kind of tough to do this match, honestly. Jacqueline has a really good finisher, but it was still difficult. You know, their taunts, they don't really have great taunts. They have a weird way of walking. You know, their weight and height, you can't edit their weight and height like you could do in No Mercy. You can't even edit their outfit because there's not really any other outfits. So the customization on the women's wrestler in WrestleMania 2000 is very lacking, but in WrestleMania No Mercy, it does get a little bit better. And you can actually create female wrestlers in WWF No Mercy. You can't create female wrestlers in WrestleMania 2000, which was kind of disappointing because, again, I would have liked to maybe make you know, a Lunger Blaze or something in WrestleMania 2000. So yeah, and you know, with the whole women's revolution, you look back at all the Attitude Era women, and I talked about this in my Let's Play with Ivory. You know, she kind of came, you know, a little bit too early in WWE because they didn't really start taking women seriously until maybe Lita and Trish and their rivalry, but then they also backed away from it. So with this, I'm kind of jump starting it here, and this is also a perfect example of what you're going to see going forward with my fantasy booking episodes. Is I'll be able to, I'm going to change who the champions are. I'm going to change, you know, who's going in as the champion, who's leaving as the champion, and changing all the things. And this is kind of fun. This is kind of fun to be able to give Jacqueline and Ivory a championship match at WrestleMania. And that's also how I like to, I like the way New Japan books their big events, where it's basically booked from, like, not least important, but basically sort of like a ranking system, you know, with the championships. Like, they start with the championships that are sort of like, you know, they start with the junior heavyweight tag team championship, and then they just work their way up with all the different championship matches. And ideally, you know, you would change the order depending on the popularity of the match. But I think it would be fun to, you know, second match after seeing the Big Show destroy Test and turning his back on the corporation. Then we have this really fun women's wrestling match with Jacqueline against Ivory, Jacqueline retaining, and now, since we are in the home of EC Dub, we have a hardcore championship match. Now, this was originally a triple threat with Billy Gunn as the hardcore champion, and I decided to omit Billy Gunn from this match because two reasons. One, he only won the hardcore championship 2 weeks before WrestleMania 15 on an episode of Raw, and him being involved with the hardcore championship, it was actually kind of weird because originally Road Dogg was, like, involved with the hardcore championship, and Billy Gunn was chasing after the IC, and then they switched places. Then it was Billy Gunn chasing after the hardcore championship and Road Dogg chasing after the IC, and that's what you would get at WrestleMania. You would get Billy Gunn in the hardcore championship. You would get Road Dogg in the Intercontinental championship. I always thought that was weird. if you watch my channel, if you've watched me before, you know I'm a huge fan of tag team wrestling, and the tag team wrestling championship match on this card is very lackluster and feels like it was thrown together. So I take Billy Gunn out of the Hardcore Championship, and we'll see him later on in the card. But you know, at St. Valentine's Day Massacre, Hardcore Holly defeated Al Snow to win the vacant title, which was vacant from Road Dogg, you know, due to injury. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to have Al Snow win the championship from Hardcore Holly here, so to continue their feud, their rivalry over the Hardcore Championship, and then it would go on to Backlash, and the tiebreaker would be at Backlash, and then hopefully I would have Al Snow win again at Backlash, and then, you know, giving Al Snow his WrestleMania moment. You know, we are in ECW territory. We're in Philly, right? So during the actual match, you even heard some of the people chanting ECW during this match. So I wanted to give Al Snow his sort of like WrestleMania moment, but also, you know, and this is, I guess, a perfect time to talk about the Brawl for All that would take place leading up to WrestleMania 15, and it was a complete mess. It was a complete disaster. Very infamous how bad it was, and how their idea of doing this actual shoot fighting tournament ended up hurting a lot of the guys involved, and unexpectedly had Bart Gunn knocking out Steve Williams, who was the favorite to win it, and Bart Gunn, his reward was being knocked out by Butterbean at WrestleMania 15. So since Butterbean and Bart Gunn aren't in WrestleMania 2000, even though you can find Bart Gunn in Virtual Pro Wrestling 2, by the way, he's wrestling as Mike Barton in Japan, I decided to omit that match completely and to pretend like the Brawl for All never happened. Instead, what I'm imagining is, you know, Hardcore Holly would become the inaugural Hardcore Champion, so then there would be a tournament to see who would face for the championship, and basically all the guys you saw in the Brawl for All, I would put them in hardcore matches. I would throw Al Snow in there. Originally, I maybe wanted to have a bunch of them that are in this game be in like a gauntlet match style kind of tournament for WrestleMania, but then I thought, they do that at WrestleMania 2000. I'll save it at WrestleMania 2000. I didn't want to repeat it. So instead, because we're in Philly, Al Snow beats Hardcore Holly, becomes the new Hardcore Champion after winning the revamped Brawl for All, in my mind, which would have just been a hardcore tournament, which would have been a great way to help build up the newly established, well, not the newly established, but it's been around for a little bit, Hardcore Championship. And there I go, changing. So we got the first title change of the night. I put the numbers to keep track of like when the different when the new reigns start. So that's why I put 0-0 as the inaugural champion, and then 0-1, and then the little V on the right side, you can see how many times that person has defended the championship if you keep the name the same. So here we go. So after the Hardcore Championship, we are actually jumping into the Tag Team Championship match for WrestleMania 15, which is going to be the New Age Outlaws going against Shamrock and Bossman. Now, a few things here. Now, this is where I did quite a bit change for the card. Both members of New Age Outlaws were featured in singles matches at WrestleMania 15 because, like I said, they were pursuing the Hardcore and IC Championship, but both reigns were short-lived. And eventually, within a few months, New Age Outlaws would return to challenging for the tag team titles and then splitting up. It was a weird time for DX. DX started out feuding with Corporation for most of the year, but then, you know, when WrestleMania 15 came around, they were sort of disjointed. They weren't a cohesive unit. And then later on in the night, we would see Triple H turn on X-Pac, even though Triple H and China would get reunited. It's very complicated. It's kind of hard to explain, but I always felt that the New Age Outlaws, DX in general, were a great antagonist to Corporation. And even though Stone Cold and sort of Mankind were fighting against the corporation at this time too, and they weren't really allies per se. They were still united in them trying to fight the corporation. So like I said at the beginning of the night, you know, this was the corporation sort of their chinks in their armor getting exposed, their armor being broken down over the night. So we had the Big Show turn on Tess, and now they've lost not only the Big Show to maybe be there at the end of the night, but Tess is hurt because Big Show beat him up so bad. Now we're gonna see the first time where the corporation are gonna lose, and that's gonna start really breaking them apart. Going into WrestleMania 15, Jeff Jarrett and Owen Hart were tag team champs, and obviously I admitted Owen because he's not in the game. Otherwise, I would have done New Age Outlaws versus Owen Hart and Jeff Jarrett. So the idea here is that Bossman and Shamrock, who were tag team champions, they would keep the titles and they wouldn't lose it to Jeff Jarrett and Owen Hart. They would keep the titles all the way going into WrestleMania, and they actually defeated the New Age Outlaws when they first won the tag team championship. So I'm kind of going over something that really happened, and I'm just sort of rewriting history again, changing it a little bit so we can get to this point of the night where it's the tag team champs from the corporation defending against the New Age Outlaws. Now, Ken Shamrock was already involved in the Intercontinental Championship Four Corners a match that was at WrestleMania 15. He was the defending Intercontinental Champion. So he was, in real WWE history, he was at one point Tag Team Champion and IC Champion, which is great. I've talked about in the past how I always felt like Ken Shamrock, really looking back on it, you know, they really didn't do as much as you would think they could have done with Ken Shamrock. So I like the idea of Ken Shamrock going into WrestleMania 15 still as a double champion, still as the most dangerous man, you know, still having these fits of rage, and that makes him a great asset for corporation. But he's teaming with Bossman, and over the past few months, the tension between the two has been, you know, rising, let's say, between them, because Ken Shamrock is such a you know, powerful personality. And sort of the same issue with Big Show, Vince McMahon is finding that he's having a hard time controlling someone like Ken Shamrock, whose emotions and anger can't be controlled half the time. So it's already been sort of hinted at that that Bossman and Ken Shamrock aren't quite exactly on the same page. And that's going to play huge into this match, because the idea here is basically they're going to lose the match because of some sort of miscommunication. Maybe Big Bossman hits Ken Shamrock by accident, or he bumps into him, or maybe Ken Shamrock bumps into Bossman by accident and Bossman doesn't like it and he pushes him or something. You know how they always do, how all of a sudden tag teams can't get along. It's gonna be something like that. They can't get along, and that causes a disconnect, and that's gonna cause Bossman taking the pin to the New Age Outlaws. They're gonna steal a win. Maybe, like, you know, it causes when they're distracted, you know, maybe Road Dogg pulls Ken Shamrock out of the ring, and, you know, Billy Gunn comes in and hits a famouser on Bossman, and then they're able to win the tag team championship. So the loss here would add pressure to Corporation's overall goal in the evening, and also, you know, start Shamrock, you know, being the second person to sort of move away from the group with miscommunication between he and Bossman. And Shamrock, you know, he would do the thing where he would snap. He would go crazy, he'd start yelling at Bossman, he'd try to attack the Outlaws, but they're already out, they already ran, and then he's in the ring, Bossman's trying to calm him down, he's like, you know, shut up, listen to me. Ken Shamrock's like, no, don't tell me to shut up, you lost us the title. And Shamrock's pissed because he's dual champion. And the way I book it too is that Shamrock still has to defend his Intercontinental Championship tonight, so he has 2 title defenses. So he's pissed off that he lost the tag team championship and he's not the one who got pinned. So they do a little back and forth. Maybe Bossman pushes him and Shamrock doesn't like it, and then you could see the crowd maybe like egging Shamrock on to attack Bossman, and that's exactly what he would do. He would attack Bossman. He would maybe give him like the big belly to belly, and then like start putting on the ankle lock, and that would actually lead into the Intercontinental Championship. You know, I mentioned we're at the home of ECW, right? So what ECW used to do a lot that WWE didn't do quite as much, but what ECW used to do a lot is they would have a lot of their segments flow into each other. You know, they would have a match, and like let's say Jason was fighting someone. Jason was fighting Jazz, right? And then Jason's fighting Jazz, and Jazz is beating up Jason. So Jazz beats up Jason, pins Jason, and after she pins Jason, you see Justin Credible come in and cane Jazz, and then that causes Jerry Lynn to run out, and Jerry Lynn and Justin Credible were supposed to have a match that night. So the bell rings, and then boom, we start the match already. And then that's going on, and then Lance Storm runs out, and then Sabu runs out, which causes RVD to run out, and then it's like a tag team match between Sabu and or then it's like a triple threat match between Sabu, RVD, and Lance Storm, and that starts. So the segments would lead into each other, right? So that's kind of my idea here. After the New Age Outlaws win, which we just had them win, here we go, New Age Outlaws winning, we would have Ken Shamrock in the ring, upset at Bossman. He's attacked Bossman now. He's got him in the ankle lock, and he's screaming. And then Val Venis would come running in. Val Venis would come running in and attack Ken Shamrock, because Ken Shamrock and Val Venis, you know, they've been feuding. And then Jeff Jarrett would come in, because now I've inserted Jeff Jarrett in the four-way Intercontinental Championship match, replacing Goldust, because Goldust isn't in the game. And then D'Lo Brown would come out. Now D'Lo Brown, you know, he would be essentially replacing Road Dogg, who was champion, who was IC champion going into WrestleMania. But we're bringing in D'Lo Brown. D'Lo Brown in WrestleMania 15, he was part of the Tag Team Championship match. Again, it was very weird what they did with the Tag Team Championship match. They had a gauntlet match on, or a Battle Royal, I should say, a Tag Team Battle Royal on Sunday Night Heat, and D'Lo Brown and Tess were the winners. They're not a tag team. They don't get along. Tess is part of the corporation, but now they have a tag team title shot against Jeff Jarrett and Owen Hart. No thought, I think, was put into the Tag Team Championship match. I think it was just a way to get people on the card. And again, if you've heard me talk about at length in my tag team Let's Play for WWF No Mercy, I talk about the tag team division over the years in WWE and how I always just feel like they never give them their time. They never give them their moment to have really good matches or really good highlights. So that's why I wanted to do a tag team match that would make sense, you know, make more sense, I think, and especially putting it in terms of feuding with the corporation and DX. But now we have Ken Shamrock, Val Venis, Jeff Jarrett, D'Lo Brown. That is my new four-way Intercontinental. So I decided to keep the four-way for a few reasons. One, because I like four-ways. I like playing four-ways in the game. I like watching four-ways. But I changed it. I made it a four-way elimination match. Because I like four-way elimination matches, and they're easier to and you can only really do a four-way elimination match in WrestleMania 2000. So I made it a four-way elimination match so I could keep it a four-way in the game, and I had to actually exit from the pay-per-view mode because you can't do a four-way in the pay-per-view mode. You can only do a Royal Rumble, and then it's like an actual Royal Rumble, and I actually had to figure that out by playing it because I put a four-way as a Royal Rumble, and when I did that, once I did my first elimination, Then I saw someone coming running down the ring, and I was like, oh no, I just messed this all up. So I had to redo everything in the pay-per-view. So full disclosure, it took a long time to get this all done. It was my first time trying it. I didn't play with the pay-per-view mode that much, but when I did, it was mostly just single matches and tag team matches. I never really played around with doing all the different style of matches, like doing a 4-way elimination and things like that. So that's my goal. That's what was my idea. And in WrestleMania 15, you know, leading into this 4-way match, the leading story was about Ryan Shamrock, who was storyline Ken Shamrock's sister, and how she was involved with Val Venis and Goldust, and then Road Dogg was thrown in there. Again, it was originally supposed to be Mr. Ass, but then Road Dogg all of a sudden switched places with Billy Gunn. I never liked the Ryan Shamrock story. I felt like it interfered with Shamrock's role within the corporation. And again, to go along with DX being a thorn in corporation's side, I thought it was more effective if New Age Outlaws were a team than to separate them and then have Goldust and Val Venis in the mix. So I omit Goldust because he's not in the game. I omit Ryan Shamrock and pretend like it never happened. D'Lo Brown was European champion before losing it to Shane McMahon at Judgment Day in October. So that led to Shane and X-Pac feuding, which again, Corporation versus DX. So I had D'Lo Brown set his sights on the IC title, which is what he would do anyway later on. And D'Lo Brown and Jeff Jarrett would actually feud over the European Championship and Intercontinental Championship title a few months after WrestleMania, and had already been feuding sort of leading into the original Tag Team Championship match at WrestleMania. You know, Jeff Jarrett, he injured Mark Henry, who was D'Lo Brown's partner, by hitting him with a guitar, and they even attacked Ivory. So I would keep the D'Lo Brown, Jeff Jarrett beef going, and that's why I would put them into this IC Championship match, because they all want a piece of the IC title. And instead of Val Venis going after Shamrock's sister, maybe he made advances to both Deborah and Ivory, and that put him on the bad side of you know, D'Lo Brown and Jeff Jarrett, you know, wanting to get something to them. You know, the way I see it is like maybe Val Venis wanted both of them to be his manager, and said, like, you know, if you want something, you know, if you want to prove to them that he's worthy, he would go after the Intercontinental title. But that drags D'Lo Brown and Jeff Jarrett into the feud, so then they all start feuding with each other. Shamrock's caught in the middle of it because Shamrock is the IC champion, and even though he's tied to his responsibilities with the corporation, he still has to defend the title against all these other wrestlers on the roster. So due to Shamrock being a loose cannon, you know, immediately following the match with the tag team match, when Shamrock is attacking Bossman, Val Venis sees it as an opportunity to get a jump on Shamrock, and he comes running out and he starts beating up on Shamrock. Then he's followed by Jeff Jarrett, and then Jeff Jarrett is followed by D'Lo Brown. Again, it's very reminiscent of that ECW segment where one match flows into the other. You know, at this point, the crowd is probably, hopefully, you know, really excited to see Ken Shamrock turn on Bossman and beat him up, and we are playing off of that energy and also playing off the fact that Ken Shamrock had another match. So why wouldn't his opponent right away come out and start attacking him, not giving him time to rest, not giving him time to recover? And Shamrock's already angry, so they're all fighting, they're all in the ring. It's an elimination match, so technically it's every person for themselves. But maybe after a little bit, Shamrock could regain his composure, and the way I see it is like maybe Jeff Jarrett tries to use his guitar to hit Shamrock, but Shamrock evades, and then D'Lo would get hit, and then D'Lo would be the first person to get eliminated. And the reason why I'm doing that, the reason why I'm having D'Lo get eliminated first, is because Jeff Jarrett hit Mark Henry with the guitar, Jeff Jarrett hit Ivory with the guitar, now he's hitting D'Lo Brown with the guitar, and that's just gonna jump their feud later on when they do start feuding over the IC title and the European title. So Jarrett tries to like change his tune. Get it? He tries to change his tune and convince Shamrock that he was trying to help him. He wasn't trying, that the guitar wasn't meant for him, that it was meant for D'Lo, and now he's trying to tell Jarrett he's trying to tell Shamrock to help him take out Val Venis, but Shamrock isn't buying it, and he puts Jarrett in the ankle lock. And right when it looks like Jeff Jarrett is gonna tap, maybe, Bossman would come back out. Well, he never really left. He never really went to the back. He was just maybe rolled out of the ring because he got beat up by Ken Shamrock. And then he would hit Ken Shamrock with his nightstick, and that would allow either Jeff Jarrett, or probably Jeff Jarrett, that would allow Jeff Jarrett to get the pin. So now Jeff Jarrett got the pin over D'Lo. Jeff Jarrett got the pin off of Val Venis, as Jeff Jarrett is just cheating all over the place and also being helped by cheating. And we're coming back to the corporation, falling apart. Bossman and Shamrock had a falling out during the tag team match. They lost their tag team titles. Shamrock blamed Bossman, attacked Bossman. Now Bossman is getting his revenge and caused Shamrock to lose his title. Of course, Shamrock goes berserk and, probably attacks both Jarrett and Venis and chases after Bossman. And and that's them. We assume that they go into the back. There's now chaos in the back. There's chaos with the corporation. They've lost the tag team championship. They've lost the Intercontinental Championship, and we're about to get a new Intercontinental Champion. It's either going to be Jeff Jarrett or Val Venis. And they finish up the match. They have I imagine maybe Jeff Jarrett tries to cheat again. He feigns injury, and or Deborah causes a distraction on Venis, but after a back and forth, I would have Val Venis pick up the win, and then I would have Deborah see this and then walk away with Val Venis, because he does have the gold over his waist, and that could cause Jeff Jarrett to be really angry and really upset, and this could lead more into a feud with Val Venis and Jeff Jarrett and D'Lo Brown feuding over the IC title. Then you can have Deborah playing a role, you can have Henry coming back and playing a role, you can have Ivory playing a role, you can have all of them. At the time, the WWE, I feel like the WWE mid-card scene was a little underrated at the time. They had a lot of solid people. I'm a big fan of Val Venis. I'm a big fan of D'Lo Brown, Ken Shamrock. There I go, finally eliminating D'Lo Brown. I wanted to eliminate him first because that's how I had it in the storyline. So I'm trying to go with the eliminations. I'm trying to do the eliminations in the storyline that I've created. But I'm a big fan of, not everything has to be just about the world title. And I feel like sometimes what I've noticed in the past with WWE storytelling, they have some really good storylines, focused on maybe the world title or another feud, and then everything else is just there. So I really like to maybe think about how all the other people can be involved and how they can also all inadvertently play a role with the major feud of the evening. Again, the major storyline of this WrestleMania for me is the fall of the corporation, but everyone sort of has some sort of effect on it, either directly or indirectly. And this is another example of how indirectly other people kind of benefit from the corporation, falling apart. No longer now do you have Ken Shamrock as the IC champion, and because of the beef with the corporation, with Bossman, all of a sudden the new animosity that allows the other wrestlers to take advantage. I want everything to be fluid. I want everything to sort of work within each other and flow within each other. And again, this is we're talking about a situation where we could change titles, where we can change situation, who goes into WrestleMania as champion, who leaves as champion. So I wanted to do that. And again, if you look at the actual story, the timeline of the WWE Intercontinental Championship at this time, it's kind of all over the place. You know, Shamrock would win it. He would win it after a tournament in October, defeating X-Pac in a tournament final after Triple H vacated it due to injury. And then Val Venis would beat him after Ken Shamrock had a very long run. He had a long for about 125 days. And then Val Venis would win the title from him at St. Valentine's Day Massacre, which was the pay-per-view before this. And then Road Dogg would win it right before WrestleMania. And then Goldust would win it right after the next night on Raw from Road Dogg. And then The Godfather would win it almost a month later. And then Jeff Jarrett would finally get his hands on it. And then that's when we would get into the Jeff Jarrett, D'Lo Brown feud, which would lead into Jeff Jarrett against China. And then Jeff Jarrett leaving the company. And then Chris Jericho would show up. So I'm just, by doing this, I feel like I'm just tightening all that. Again, hindsight is 2020. WWE can't predict the future. So they're only doing what they think is best at the time. So the way I'm looking at it is like, well, how can we just maybe trim the fat a little bit around the stories that were being told at the time and sort of create new storylines, but still sort of going in the same direction. You know, with Val Venis winning the championship, that's him basically winning the championship at St. Valentine's Day Massacre. But, you know, I'm not a big fan of changing championships too much right before WrestleMania or even right after WrestleMania. So I like to, you know, set, okay, this is going to be my champion at this moment, and then he's going to hold it until WrestleMania. So that's what I did with Shamrock. And I wanted to give Shamrock that extra little bit of run. And I was even listening to, Bruce Pritchard's podcast, Something to Wrestle With, you know, with Conrad Thompson. They did a whole episode on WrestleMania 15, and it was very interesting to hear about the behind the scenes of not just that pay-per-view, but they do it a lot of, you know, writing and the storyline for a lot of these pay-per-views. And a lot of the times, really what it is when they do these multi-man matches, when they do the tag team gauntlet match, they're really doing it because they want to give everyone a spot on the card, which is great. I love that. I love that they want to give people a spot on the card. So again, I want to sort of do that as well. You know, I want to give D'Lo Brown a spot on the card. I want to give Jeff Jarrett a spot on the card. I don't want to say, well, I took away your tag team match, so now you're not going to be on the card. So I'm just working things around, but I feel like I'm still pushing everything in the same direction. But, you know, now we give Val Venis the championship win, and now he is the new IC champion. And now the next match is a non-title match. So this is another title change, and then the next match is a non-title match. And this for me was the low point of WrestleMania 15. These two matches that would come up, which would be Kane versus Triple H and Shane McMahon versus X-Pac. And the only reason why I say it's the low point of the actual WrestleMania 15 is because the storyline that's being told with Kane versus X-Pac, I mean Triple H versus Kane at the time, is that China has sided with Kane and the corporation, right? And she turned on DX. But then at the end of Kane and Triple H, she turns on Kane and reunites with Triple H. So it's like a big turn. It's like, oh, China's back with Triple H. Right before the Shane McMahon X-Pac match, you see all of the New Age, all of DX united. You see Road Dogg, Billy Gunn, Triple H, X-Pac, China, and they're like, DX, we're together, we're stronger than ever, we're no longer gonna go our separate ways. And then during the Shane McMahon X-Pac match, which is a good match, and Shane's like first big WrestleMania outing, Triple H comes out and turns on X-Pac, causing X-Pac to lose the match. And we have these back-to-back turns. You know, we have these back-to-back turns. So China turns on Kane, effectively having Kane being kicked out of the corporation, I guess. And then Triple H turns on X-Pac because now Triple H is joining the corporation, I guess. You could tell the fans were like completely puzzled. It was completely out of nowhere. It seemed like, obviously, we would know down the line, eventually we would go into the corporation and the ministry and Vince McMahon pulling the strings. And it was just a lot of twists and turns for what? You know, like, it's just, who are you fooling? Who are you trying to surprise? Going back to my theme, where this is the corporation, falling apart. I'm keeping China with Kane. For whatever reason, China was with Kane. Maybe she was mad at Triple H or something. I don't even remember too much of the details as to why China joined Corporation and left DX. But again, at that time, DX was kind of disjointed. So instead, I would have China be the only one who briefly joined the Corporation after having a falling out with Triple H. But at the end, China would reunite with Triple H and then just leave it at that. Leave China and Triple H getting together. Triple H gets his win over Kane, and then the Shane McMahon match, Triple H wouldn't get involved. He wouldn't betray X-Pac, and I would come into that. But you know, this would basically be another Corporation versus DX moment. And originally the match ends in DQ. That match ends in DQ, and it's like, why have I'm not a big fan of having DQs in WrestleMania, you know, or even in major pay-per-views to begin with. So instead of it, I would have China, you know, maybe give a low blow to Kane, and that would have Triple H be able to hit the pedigree onto Kane and have Triple H get a win over Kane instead of making it a DQ. You know, and then we would still have the promo. We would still have the promo about how DX has been helping to, you know, defeat the Corporation. They won the tag team championship. They beat Kane. China's back, and now X-Pac is gonna go out there and he's gonna beat Shane McMahon. So now DX is looking strong. Now DX is ready for anything that the Corporation can throw at them. Test is out. Test is hurt. You know, Big Show left. Ken Shamrock is probably fighting with the Bossman backstage, or Bossman is probably hiding from Ken Shamrock. He probably doesn't want to come out to help Shane McMahon. So now Shane McMahon is worried. He's worried because DX is, you know, completely at their full form, their full power, and he doesn't know what to do. And so I just make it sort of like DX sort of outwitting the Corporation, even with having Kane as their ally, and this could lead to a different kind of fallout with Kane. Maybe a whole different story with Kane joining the Ministry. I always thought it was kind of strange that Kane never really fully joined the Ministry, even though he seemed like a perfect fit. Also, I do have to mention, no Pete Rose. No Pete Rose in this match. You know, the mascot, the Philadelphia mascot, I forget his name, but the mascot came out right before this match when Kane made his entrance. He comes out and he's dancing around and he's poking at Kane, and Kane reveals that it's Pete Rose. And so he attacks Pete Rose, and he gives him, I think he gives him a choke slam, maybe a tombstone. And it was a silly segment, but like, I was never really a big fan of the whole Pete Rose and Kane beef. So we omit that. So that never happened. Pete Rose isn't in the game. I couldn't do it anyway. So we're just gonna get rid of it. Again, this is fantasy booking. We can do whatever we want. If you're fantasy booking and you want to have Pete Rose become the world champion, let me know. That's cool. That's cool that you did that. That's the beauty of video games. If you've made a Pete Rose call, let me know. Just show me. That would be probably hilarious to look at. I also, if you notice, with Triple H, I edited his attire to make it look more like his DX outfit when he wore at WrestleMania 2000. I mean, not WrestleMania 2000, but WrestleMania 15. I guess I should say, you know, I tried to do that with everyone for this episode. I tried to make everyone's outfits look similar to what they wore at WrestleMania 2000. So that was really fun. You know, go back and watch WrestleMania 15. It's interesting. Watching WrestleMania 15, doing research for this, I forgot how convoluted the storyline was with DX and Corporation and the corporate ministry and Stone Cold. You know, we all remember Stone Cold versus Vince McMahon and Stone Cold feuding with the Boss. But there was a lot of twists and turns during that time that really don't make a whole lot of sense. And again, they were probably just winging it. Honestly, they were probably just trying to top what they did the week before. You know, this is right in the middle of the Monday Night Wars. This is when WWF at the time is the most popular it's ever been. And even WrestleMania 15 was a huge financial success for them. Looking back on it, as a WrestleMania, as what we've come to expect WrestleManias to be, I don't think it quite holds up. I don't think the actual WrestleMania 15 event quite holds up because of a lot of these twists and turns, because of a lot of these storylines that feel disjointed from the main storyline, which is supposed to be the main villains, the corporation, feuding with, you know, the WWE roster, or, you know, the heroes of the WWE roster, which is Stone Cold and Mankind and DX. And I wasn't really a big fan of DX splitting up and getting back together and splitting up and getting back together. It's actually really funny because when Triple H comes out and he turns on X-Pac, the fans start chanting for HBK. And HBK was kind of, you know, he was the commissioner and he was sort of going along with the corporation, and then he sort of wasn't. It was always very unclear. And then even at the end of the night, Shawn Michaels, he comes out and he says that, you know, no corporate, you know, member can get involved with the finals match. Instead of like the commissioner figure coming out and saying that that can't happen, I'm trying to make it so that it doesn't happen because they've just been broken apart the whole night. They can't have Big Show come out because he's gone. They can't have Test come out because he's hurt. They can't have Bossman and Shamrock come out because they're fighting, and Shamrock very clearly looks like he's done with the corporation and he's a loose cannon. You know, you can't predict what he's gonna do. Triple H and China take Kane. Kane's frustrated. Maybe Kane leaves. You know, maybe again, or maybe again the same thing. Vince McMahon maybe berates Kane backstage, and then Kane just nudges him. You know, I mentioned in the Big Show match that, you know, during WrestleMania 15, Big Show would choke slam Vince McMahon, and I would refrain from having anyone attack Vince McMahon until the very end. You know, with maybe Stone Cold giving him the stunner like he did in WrestleMania 15, because that would be sort of like the button on everything. Like, there's Vince McMahon, his corporation's in ruins, he's defeated, his moment is over. So after Triple H would beat Kane, we would go into Shane McMahon versus X-Pac, and this was really cool to watch. Shane McMahon, you know, there was a lot of pressure on Shane McMahon at the time because he's out there, he's involved in matches, he's also the boss's son. So there was a lot of expectation as to, you know, what is he going to do? How is he going to be in the ring? And I think he surprised a lot of people with this match in particular. It was a big marquee match. It happened pretty close to the top of the card. It was I believe it was the third to last match that went on that night. Let me just double check. I know the Hell in the Cell was the second to last match. Yeah, it was the third to last match that would happen. And you know, basically Shane McMahon comes out with Test, which is interesting because later on Test and Shane would have another street fight. But you know, we're not gonna have Test come out because he's too hurt. He can't do anything. So Shane McMahon comes out by himself, and it's Shane McMahon versus X-Pac. And we could maybe have the Mean Street Posse, because they were sitting in the audience during this time. We could have the Mean Street Posse try to get involved as well. But, you know, DX would come out and, you know, just completely beat up the Mean Street Posse. And X-Pac would get the big win, essentially. I really wouldn't change too much of this match, because I thought it was a pretty good match. I think it still kind of holds up. Obviously, Shane McMahon, he's definitely grown as a performer, and you know, there's not really a whole lot of crazy stuff he does, although he does do the one table spot, I believe. Or no, maybe he didn't. Maybe he didn't do that in this one. But him and X-Pac have a really good match. And I would just basically keep it the match the same way, but I wouldn't have X-Pac lose because Triple H is interfering, I would just have X-Pac win because the corporation can't, they don't have anyone to help. And Shane McMahon was kind of out of his league to begin with. Again, it's about corporation getting their comeuppance. It's about corporation, getting their justice, what was due to be delivered to them. And now everyone is finally beating them. The heroes are beating the villains, and everyone's gonna go home happy. You know what I mean? Like that's how I see this WrestleMania. And that's how I'm doing it with all the different storyline changes. Missing a big tope right there with X-Pac. So this would be another title change. So basically, all the titles have changed with the exception of the Women's Championship. The Women's Championship is the only championship that hasn't changed hands in my storyline so far, with Jacqueline retaining. But we had Al Snow winning the Hardcore Championship, New Age Outlaws taking the Tag Team Championship away from the corporation, Val Venis winning the Intercontinental Championship. Now we have X-Pac winning the European Championship. And I also did that because, with Shane McMahon being the European champion, and this is something I talked about in my European Championship path, the European Championship, it was introduced like it was a big deal with the Bulldog winning it, holding it for a long time, but then Shawn Michaels would win it from him, and then Triple H would get it, and him and Owen Hart would feud a little bit over it, and then Triple H would have the title for a while. And then after that, D'Lo Brown would get it, and then X-Pac and D'Lo Brown would trade back and forth with it. But when Shane McMahon got it, he would beat X-Pac, and then he would just retire as the champion shortly after WrestleMania. And, he would give the title to Mideon. And then, because he forgot about it. He was like, oh yeah, here, why don't you take it? I don't really need this. And I really never liked that. I never liked that they did that. It's the same thing when, Jim Duggan found the TV title in the trash. I don't like when titles are disregarded like that. It really bugs me. It's a big pet peeve of mine. And I want to still keep the momentum going. I liked X-Pac as champion. I thought him and D'Lo Brown had a pretty good feud over the title. And then it could go back to after X-Pac and Shane have done their feud with X-Pac winning and DX, coming out on top. Maybe we can go back to D'Lo Brown and X-Pac, and D'Lo Brown can get the championship, and then he could feud with Jeff Jarrett. Again, sort of achieving the same goals. Because D'Lo Brown, he would beat Mideon, and he would become the first European and Intercontinental champion at the same time, because by that time, he would have the Intercontinental Championship. But it would make more sense, I think. Again, hindsight is 2020, but it would make more sense to me to have D'Lo Brown beat X-Pac for the championship because they've already feuded over the championship. So again, it's just about keeping the spirit of the European Championship alive, but I'm also really continuing that story of Shane McMahon and X-Pac, which is basically Corporation and DX. Now we're getting to a cage match with Mankind and The Undertaker, but if you saw, I titled the match Hell in a Cell. So this is where the fantasy booking really gets fantastical. I debated about what I was going to do with Undertaker Mankind for WrestleMania 15 in my fantasy booking. I thought about it for a very long time. There's a lot of stories about how Vince Russo and a few other of the writers were really pushing for Mankind to be in the main event with Stone Cold and The Rock. And, they didn't want to do that at the time. They wanted to just keep it a one-on-one match. It's really funny because then next year, they would have a four-way match. They would have, the McMahon in every corner. And Mick Foley would be in the four-way with Rock, Triple H, and Big Show. But also, what in actuality, the reality of it was that Mankind probably didn't really have a featured match at WrestleMania because he was hurt, he was injured, particularly because of all the matches he was doing, and also he was still hurting from his Hell in a Cell match with The Undertaker that took place, about a year, less than a year before this, at King of the Ring 1998, which was also in Philadelphia, but it was in the Civic Arena in Pittsburgh. And this is taking place in Philadelphia. So, but it's still in it's still in Philadelphia, and or Pennsylvania, I should say. I'm saying Philadelphia, but Pennsylvania. So what I thought was like, okay, if this is fantasy booking, Mankind is not hurt. Undertaker had a Hell in a Cell match with the Bossman, which was just horrendous. It was horrible. It doesn't hold up. It's a terrible match. And then at the end, he hangs Bossman, which is like, no, why would you do that? Terrible idea all around. Coming off of the momentum of the Hell in a Cell matches, there was basically this was the fifth Hell in a Cell match, but really it was two marquee Hell in a Cell matches: Shawn Michaels versus Undertaker, Undertaker versus Mankind. And I always thought, well, why wasn't there an Undertaker versus Mankind 2? The next Hell in a Cell match that would happen after this would be Triple H versus Cactus Jack, which would be at No Way Out, and it would be for the WWF Championship, and Cactus Jack would put his career on the line. So I thought, actually leading into maybe when I do my WrestleMania 2000, I thought, let's put Mankind in a Hell in a Cell match with Undertaker yet again. Maybe Mankind wanted a title shot, but so for Vince McMahon to sort of screw with him, he decides to put the Undertaker in a Hell in a Cell match with Mankind because Undertaker also wants a title shot. So this is essentially basically a #1 contendership for the WWF Championship, with maybe the winner of this match facing either Austin or The Rock at Backlash. Because at Backlash, basically, Undertaker and Mankind kind of repeat what they did at WrestleMania. Mankind faces Big Show again. Undertaker faces Ken Shamrock. He feuds with the Corporation. So this could be the start of the rise, the real rise of the corporate ministry. And we could also have a repeat of one of the most famous matches in WWF history. The Hell in a Cell match has become famous from the Undertaker Mankind match, but it's really interesting that we never got a second Mankind Undertaker match. That's crazy to think about. And again, a lot of it had to do with injuries, specifically Mankind, Mick Foley. But in this fantasy world where no one gets hurt, where everyone is 100% healthy, we're doing Undertaker Mankind Hell in a Cell 2. It has to be a cage match in WrestleMania 2000, because they only have cage matches in WrestleMania 2000, but I still decided to keep it as a cage match because, we all know we're talking about Hell in a Cell, right? So it's I'm bending my rules a little bit. I'm calling it a Hell in a Cell, but it's a cage match. But you get the idea. And of course, Undertaker wins. I made quick work there of Mankind, but I would imagine it would be another crazy match. Again, we're in Philly, ECW, and they had the Hell in a Cell match in Philly less than a year ago. So it's just recreating that, creating another special WrestleMania, moment, especially with the Hell in a Cell. Because, there was only 2 other Hell in a Cells at WrestleMania. It would be 28 with Taker and Triple H, and then 32 with Taker and Shane McMahon. So that was what I would do, and then Undertaker would go on, probably to Backlash, to face either Stone Cold or The Rock. This is the big main event. This is what everyone was hyped up for, and honestly, I don't change a thing. I don't change a thing for Stone Cold versus The Rock. It's the one thing when I was rewatching WrestleMania 15, it was the one thing that I was like, yep, this is great. This is awesome. But it was everything that led up to it, with the Corporation, with everything. I felt like a lot of it was disjointed, even from the finale of WrestleMania 15, which was Austin beating The Rock, the corporate champion, giving Vince McMahon a Stone Cold Stunner. You did have Mankind eventually run out as the ref, but again, I would sort of get rid of all that. I would have Corporation, I would have Vince McMahon would be the only one out there to try to do something, because his entire corporation has just been wiped out that night. You know what I mean? Like within a night, it just all falls apart after months and months of them, first starting out strong and controlling the whole WWE, and then over the months, the uprising started to begin, the tension within the corporation started building, and it just all falls apart at WrestleMania, and Stone Cold is able to defeat The Rock clean in the middle of the ring. Maybe Vince McMahon tries to interfere, but Stone Cold just, doesn't let him. And this was a big match. The Rock and Austin, their feud is legendary, but, again, it's the feuds like these that I really enjoy, because if you really think about it, they didn't really meet a lot one-on-one. The major other match before this between the two was for the Intercontinental title at In Your House 19, D-Generation X. That's what it was called. It was weird. They always named the In Your House names very weird. But that was about, I think, a year and a half, 2 years before this. So it was right after, I believe it was right after Austin got hurt from Owen Hart, but or right before that, somewhere around that time. So this was a big moment for the two of them, main eventing WrestleMania. Stone Cold main evented WrestleMania the year before against HBK, defeating HBK. So this would be another moment for Austin to win the title again. He becomes first ever person to win the WWE Championship back-to-back at WrestleManias. But there's really nothing I would change in this match. This is like the one thing I don't really change in all of WrestleMania 15. In my whole fantasy booking scenario, sometimes what works. And with Austin and The Rock, it's like, I do think that maybe there was a place for doing Mankind, Austin, and The Rock. I do think that was a real strong contender as to what my main event was gonna be, but I wanted to save something for Mankind for when I do WrestleMania 2000, the actual WrestleMania 2000 in WWF No Mercy. It's funny too, I didn't mention it all video, but it's funny, like, the arena says WrestleMania 2000 in the back. That's not what the WrestleMania 15 thing looked like. And it was also, WrestleMania 15 was in 1999. This game came out in 1999, but it was called WrestleMania 2000. And then when No Mercy comes out, we actually get WrestleMania 2000, which the actual arena does have the 2000 in the background. I just think that's funny. Just wanted to point that out. But yeah, Stone Cold and The Rock main event for WrestleMania 15. That's it. There's really nothing else I would change. At the end, you would still have that moment with Stone Cold giving a Stone Cold stunner to Vince McMahon, celebrating. Maybe we'd see an image of Vince McMahon all beat up, alone. Shane was taken out. Kane was taken out of the equation. Shamrock taken out of the equation. Bossman taken out of the equation. Everyone. Big Show left. Test taken out. Mean Street Posse even probably got beat up by DX in that Kane Triple H and that Shane McMahon X-Pac match. Everyone's gone. There's no one left, and it's just The Rock against Stone Cold. But because of Stone Cold's, sheer badassness, he defeats The Rock. And then this could maybe be the way I want to do it. The way I want to do these fantasy booking scenarios is I kind of want them to all exist sort of within the same universe. That's my idea. That's what I want to do. But, I might make changes depending on the events themselves. That's it. That's basically it. That's WrestleMania 15, fantasy booked by Be Better Gamer. If you're still here, let me know what you think. Let me know what you think in the comments below. You know what to do. You've been on YouTube before. Like, comment, subscribe. But I really would love to hear your feedback, what you thought, what changes you would make. Again, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm not saying I'm smarter than WWE. I'm better than WWE. This is just my different creative interpretation. This is my Elseworlds. This is my what if. Remember those what if comics? I think they still do them, but like, what if Spider-Man could fly? This is basically that. This is a what if scenario. because I'm a big fan of what if scenarios. I'm a big fan of these wrestling games, and this is what I do when I play wrestling games. I fantasy book, I fantasy play. So let me know what you thought in the comments below. And yeah, and let me know. I'm probably gonna also hold a vote as to what pay-per-view I should do next, so keep an eye out for that on my channel. And I hope you enjoyed WrestleMania 15, the fantasy booking episode of WrestleMania 15. I'm Be Better Gamer. Until next time, you know what to do. Keep watching all the wrestling.